One. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our three Beardmigos podcast video.
You started to forget the name, didn't you?
No, I
You
was
were
trying
about
to
to say it
figure out.
wrong.
I was trying to
We've
figure out
been
what
doing
came
this
after.
so long that he's already forgot. This is
I was trying to
awesome.
figure out what came after the three Beardmigos. Is it a podcast? Is this a YouTube thing? What is it?
Oh, yeah.
So this is the three Beardmigos, and we're joined today by our elder statesman of youth ministry, Tim Ramseier.
What up, Tim?
Our first official guest on the pod. We gave it to someone that has been doing what we've been doing for a lot longer than we have. And so today we kind of just want to talk about youth ministry, and we want to get Tim's perspective on how things have changed, because if you're listening to this, you're probably in one of our youth groups. So I'm going to toss it to Ben, and Ben can then do what he had planned. Hello, Ben.
I love that Ben's like, what did I have planned?
I was like, hey, wait, I'm not the guest. How's it going, guys? Hey, we are glad you stopped by. This could be a, very different look into things to see. We can talk about what Tim's seen over the years in his work with youth ministry, and we can even talk a little bit about what it was like for me, Josh, and Andy growing up in a youth group. Might just be something kind of fun for you guys as you know the youth group you grew up in today.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get a little perspective on how things have changed and how they might continue to change. Who knows, so thanks, Josh, for putting me on the spot.
You guys, you don't understand. This will stop changing. This locks in from now to eternity. There's no more change, okay?
Oh, okay.
I can't.
Good, because I don't like change. It makes me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks have been enough change for me for the rest of my life. So.
And Andy has not yet changed that shirt.
I mean, I didn't wear this one yesterday.
You wore it inside out.
Now, full disclosure, the pants I'm wearing now have been the same pants I've wore the last 3 days.
Wow.
But no shame in this game.
You change the underwear. That's all that matters, right?
Yeah, flip them inside out. You get an extra day.
Reversible polo is the new thing, man. Andy's pulling it off.
That's how I'm going to roll.
Actually, he's not pulling it off. He's pulling it off and putting it right back on. But
Hey.
It's like the parachute game you played in gym class where you just whip it up and see how long it'll take to come down.
Jeez.
You're welcome, Tim.
I've heard of that game, but I actually have no idea what people are talking about when they say
Like,
that.
in gym class when they would bring in the big parachute thing, and you
You didn't play parachute where you throw the balls on and play popcorn? Dude, your life sucked, didn't it?
I know, man. We played games. We didn't go science parachute flying.
Oh,
dude, I've got a friend here in town that's got one. Next time you're in the HOT, I'll get it. We'll play parachute.
So we're gonna curl, then we're gonna play some parachute. We're gonna have a full day, man.
Yeah, Tim will. You think Camp Navigate would sponsor our curling tournament?
Oh. Yeah, but what are you going to curl on? On cement or ice?
Cement with baby oil.
That's like taking a slide on a cheese grater. You kidding me?
Only a Wisconsin person would talk about the cheese grater.
Hey, listen, you gotta take a slide on cement. You'll be leaving a couple.
We could do it on a wood grain floor or something that's slick.
Oh, yeah. There's no slivers in a wood grain floor that go deep into the butt. No, you're fine. Go for it.
I mean, I'm not sliding. We're sliding a stone.
Oh, okay.
I'm not like a dog scooting my bottom across this. Like,
Oh
yeah, we're recording.
Yes.
Ministry. That's the change in youth ministry. Back in the day, we didn't use those big old stones. We threw kids across the wood floor.
Yeah, we saw how far we could throw each other.
Right.
Yeah. Back in the day before Red Rover and Chubby Bunny was banned,
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, those are the good old days. Are you kidding me? I remember.
Hold on. We're not supposed to be playing Chubby Bunny anymore?
No.
No, not
You
really.
die, man. You could die.
You can't do milk either. Remember that one?
Oh, where you drink the gallon of milk and puke?
Inside of an hour.
Gallon challenge? Oh, we still do those. Not at youth group, just with friends.
Maybe that's why I'm lactose intolerant, because Gallon Challenge youth groups tried Gallon Challenge so often, It messed me up.
I just don't like milk in general, so I always got out of that.
Oh, man.
Well, then you guys just didn't enjoy the electric chair. We had that in Youth for Christ back in the 70s.
Now, for those who don't know, could you elaborate on the electric chair? This is one of my favorite stories.
We would have a stool, all right, a four-legged stool, like you have at a breakfast bar, and on the rungs underneath there's a little platform with a car battery, and the wires are going up to an electric grid that was tacked down to the wood seat, and you would sit on that, and they would sit there with a plunger, detonator, and they would do a countdown. And if like, for instance, we'd take these to lock-ins and bowl-ins, and if you hit a certain pin, you had to sit on the electric chair. And then we'd count down, okay, it'll be on 3. So
hold on. So if you hit a certain pin, so like if you got a strike, you're screwed, right?
Basically.
I'd gutter every one of them.
Well, there's also that thing saying that, but if you gutter, you have to sit on twice.
Oh,
Dang it.
it's a bush league.
There was that one kid that figured out the loophole, and they're like, okay, we got to figure out a way for them not to cheat at this.
That's
Twice.
right. If I have to do it, so do you.
Well, what we would do is we'd spray paint a pin or 2, and we'd put them in the stack with a 10. And then at that point, there's just no way they'd get out of it. It was like everybody knew it was going to happen to them. And so we'd go, okay, on 3, we're going to throw the plunger, and we'd always throw it on 1, so it's because they're trying to lift themselves off just at the last second, and it wouldn't quite work. But then they start figuring out, well, listen, if we create a chain of people holding hands with a guy that's on the stool, we kind of can do that, and nobody really feels it until somebody breaks the chain and lets go of a hand, and then they all get it. So that's on the don't do list by the liability insurance companies, and we can't do it.
You are the reason that kids are afraid of youth group games.
I tell you what, we would do Caro syrup on toilet seats. Yeah, you paint a toilet seat with Caro syrup. It dries clear and shiny just like the seat does.
Oh my goodness.
The seat builds up a little head of steam, and then you can't get off.
This might actually happen at my church coming up, guys.
Yeah. You've
Walter and Dylan need to get ready.
Ripped out and
Give us ideas.
Yeah, if you're out there and you think that youth ministry now is scary, be thankful that you were not
we're
in
not
Tim's youth group
anymore.
back in the day.
So I remember playing this youth group game called Electricity, where you'd flip a coin, and then if it were the right thing, you'd squeeze down the line, and whoever got down there first. I think that was probably the adapted version of Tim's game. After that got outlawed, we're like, okay, we can't really electrocute people, so we'll call the game Electricity and still squeeze hands. Just no one gets shocked and pained now, And I gotta say, I would have preferred the OG game. That sounded a lot more fun.
Oh yeah, and you know what? You have to experiment to see what it tastes like, what it felt like. So we sat on the chair ourselves.
Tasting electricity now too.
Oh man, you lick that thing! I'll tell you, it hurt. It hurt. I mean, you're talking a car battery.
So, Ben, Josh, what are the 2 worst games you played in youth group?
Worst games.
Games that looking back, you're like, there's no amount of money that I would do that again. So for me, I think it was Cheeto Toes.
Oh.
So we threw everybody's name in a hat, and then whoever's name I drew out, they got to put Cheetos in between their toes, and I had to eat them.
Okay.
So I think that was.
Wait, always had to be the eater of the Cheeto Toes?
Well, we had a wheel, and so you would spin this wheel of terror.
And look at Andy.
You landed on, that's what you did.
Andy volunteered every time. What are you talking about?
I mean, I like Cheetos, man. The not the puffs, but the smaller ones. I'm in.
You're one Twinkie Toes. You were playing for Twinkie Toes, man. You guys ever do the one where you peel the banana with your bare feet and the other person's got to eat it?
Oh, I've never played that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right.
That sounds fun.
It works too. Kids are actually pretty good at peeling a banana with bare feet. I
mean, really, if you can do that, that's impressive.
Oh yeah. It proves the primate status. That's it. They
doesn't help our stance with Darwinism, but whatever.
Well,
I mean, I think for me, I love this game personally, but I get why it's no longer allowed because I was very good at this game. Red Rover.
Well, dude, anybody our size is going to be good at Red Rover.
I've never lost at Red Rover.
Never lost.
I've lost many games in youth group, but never lost Red Rover.
I mean, I lost friends over Red Rover, but never lost
You
Red
go
Rover.
find two skinny girls, you're like, I'm coming. You really want Josh? I'm coming over. And then boom. You know?
The coming through the drywall would be the fun part in my eyes for you.
I just picture Josh as the Kool-Aid man.
Oh, yeah.
And then just busting through.
We need to get you a costume, Josh. So.
Oh, Halloween is coming, my friend.
Okay, serious now. Get back to the question. The changes in youth ministry since the 70s. Content. Oh, my gosh. Content sucks. Sorry,
What do you
guys.
mean content?
There is none, really. I mean, the content is so trivial at best and sometimes cliche at the other end. It's frustrating.
Like now or then?
There was a base of knowledge back in the day because I think more people attended church. There were more Sunday schools because that's gone the wayside now. You don't have Sunday school so much in most churches.
Do either of y'all have? Do any of y'all have Sunday school at your church?
Yeah.
Okay, we do not. We do not.
Well, and the hard part too is attendance, because if you get a kid, they now consider once every 6 weeks to be regular attendance. You know,
Really?
that's a software we use at our church, and it's called Fellowship One, I believe.
Yeah.
They consider once every 6 weeks to be a regular attendant. Now,
That's less than once a month.
Good math.
Sorry, I
Good
just
math.
did that math
in
in my head.
Kentucky.
Yes, Kentucky education. I had to sit and think of how many weeks were in a month. Don't judge me.
And he's in charge of kids. The future is gone.
Hey, they don't come to us to learn school.
To learn school. Okay, there you go again.
Yeah, I don't learn on math, guys.
I can learn them anything, man. No,
I look at my kids and I say, y'all gonna learn today.
I love the accent too. That helps. It really helps.
Yeah.
Well,
More intimidating.
So Marcus All, what's
I
that?
think the kids today are a lot more. I'm going to say there's a high illiteracy rate biblically, a very high illiteracy rate, a lot more so than when I was a kid and when I first started.
You're right. We can't assume like, hey, you know this story, right? You've heard this before, because sometimes you find yourself when you're teaching a lesson, and I do love that we do Sunday school, because it does give me a more personal chance to teach, especially if they've been in the large church setting, and a lot of teenagers don't get a whole lot out of a lesson, up from a stage, as good as the lesson may have been. So getting that more chance to teach and have discussion. But I have found that is, you're right, that is a different thing we're dealing with. Sometimes they'll be kind of referencing a story, and you'll be like, well, you've heard the story, of Moses and the burning bush. And then every once in a while, you'll like see some kind of people kind of like looking around like, do people know that story, right? And then you're like, okay, we need to actually, I guess, go back and cover this then, So we kind of just assume that it's where it used to be, and you're right, it's different.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I run into the most is, you write a sermon thinking that, that some of like the basic stuff is just assumed. And then more often than not, sometimes I have to go back and say, okay, no, here's what I meant here, like this is the story. Like comparing Jesus to Jonah, growing up, I knew who Jonah was. Like, but when Jesus says I'm greater than Jonah, some people are like, well, who is Jonah?
Is that Jonah Hill? Yeah, I saw his movie.
I mean, I am better than Jonah Hill, but
they're like, yeah, a lot of people are better than Jonah Hill. What's the big deal here? Like, come on. Sorry, Jonah Hill, if you're watching, we did not mean to put you on the burner like that, man. It just happened.
But if you're watching and would like to come on, just let us know. We can
Jonah
say
Hill, you were absolutely better than us. Please be on our podcast. Okay, sorry.
Well, you guys would have to have a red button. You would have to have a red button to control that.
I can mute anyone I want. See.
What did you say about my mom?
That's right.
What did you call me?
I am unmuted by host. That's what the sign says.
Yeah, I muted you. And then you talked about Andy's mom.
All right. Now,
She's a nice lady.
what's the other thing that's changed about youth ministry? I'll tell you what, accessibility of kids. Kids are a lot more mobile now than they used to be. I mean, they were mobile before, but now it's just like they do move in packs, you know? The question of a kid going to an event isn't like, well, how much does it cost? What's the date? It's like, who else is going to be there? Before they do anything, it's like, I don't know if I want to be with that crowd, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a major thing. And the thing is, too, Josh, for you grew up and you had a large church, a couple hundred kids in the youth group. There's always stuff going on. But if you're in a small church like maybe Andy or Ben, you know, 10, 20 kids, the big question is, like, do I want to go out and hang out with those guys? The kids I usually hang out with anyways. You know?
Yeah.
And then
there's kind of the multiple dynamic too. Like, you know, we lived in a small town back then. Or I lived in a small town. I don't actually know where Andy grew up because podcast.
Oh,
our
small
first
town,
meeting.
dude. We go by counties. That's how small
yeah.
my town was. We went by counties.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town. At the time I was in youth group, there wasn't much to do, you know. And now there's so much more going on in today's world. Like what Tim said, that does affect the accessibility. Is not only like, hey, who's going, but even in small towns or big towns, there's always something going on that's kind of competing with trying to get kids together.
Yeah. Culturally, too, you guys, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I was a little bit, my church was a large church. We had about 700-800 people. So the youth group was pretty good. Here's how cool it was back in that time. My church was the old YMCA that was converted over. So the sanctuary was a gymnasium, and the jogging track was the balcony with the front end knocked out of it where the pulpit area was, okay? But that also said that our basement had a swimming pool, and we had
like the best church for youth ministry ever.
Yes.
We had a swimming pool. That's where the baptisms occurred. And then we had a four-lane bowling alley. A four-lane bowling alley with a lane change, not a lane changer, but the pin changer was done by hand mechanically. You put the pins in a rack, pull the chain, it would lower it down and drop the pins and raise up. And then you had to sit on a bench so that when the ball came in, it hit below your legs. And you put that into the thing and set it by hand.
Speaking of the electric chair and whatnot, do you know how much fun you could have had with that?
Oh, yeah, because there's no running away from that. So, no, we used to make
Get in the shin like a man.
Oh, yeah. Plus, we had a basketball court in our basement, too. So we had a wood shop. I mean, we had everything going for us back in that day, which is so rare.
I wish my church had a pool. I'm going to ask the elders for that.
Yeah, you want it indoors, not outdoors, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, hey, if your elders go for it, let me know, and we'll present it to mine, too.
Okay.
They'll say, go use Josh's. We'll pay the rent.
Good with that, too.
We'll pay the rent, so.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Have you noticed, Tim, that also, the point you raised is good. You know, like there's people that, you know, they'll ask, like, who's coming, whatever. But I think just the commitment level is lower. Like, when I was a high schooler, I mean, I lived, like, 20 minutes from my church.
Mm-hmm.
But if my church was doing something, if my parents weren't willing to drive me, I was trying to find a ride, or I was like, hey, I'm taking the car, I'm going.
Yeah.
I wasn't missing church.
Yeah.
It wasn't I had to. Like, my parents sometimes would be like, you don't have to go to this. I'm like, no, I'm going.
Oh, you lost us. No sound.
Can you hear
I'm
me
not
now?
back.
There you go.
Back?
Don't lean that far away from your computer and talk.
No, but I'm saying, like, I was always there. You know, my parents didn't force me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was if church was going, I was going to be at church.
But, you know, you think about it too, Josh, you were tied into a large youth group that had a lot of activity. That was probably what was going on in town. And so that was the draw. I mean, you wanted to be in the middle of the action. Whereas if you're in a small church or a small youth group, and Ben, like you, with being the pastor's son, you had a sense of duty. You know, I have to go, whether or not I really want to go sometimes. I mean, we had a lot of cool stuff going on, even way back then. But I'd still want to stay home on a Wednesday night to watch my TV shows I watch.
Yeah,
Right.
but you see, like, I was going, like, my church had small groups on Wednesday night. and that was it. It was just small groups, and there was lots of things I could have done. But every Wednesday I was borrowing my mom's car or my dad's car so I could go to small group. Like it wasn't just like going to.
Did you guys stop doing small? As a general thing, you see culturally speaking. It used to be Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Okay, that was pretty much the standard protected nights. Okay, or days. Are you seeing? Because this is what I'm seeing. Wednesday night going the way. Pretty much like if we're going to have a Wednesday, it's going to be a small group instead of prayer meeting, and then the kids have got their small group or they got their stuff upstairs or wherever. It's like we're all going to church on Wednesday night. The adults have got stuff and you got stuff going.
Yeah, I think that's going by the wayside, and I think it's because we overcommit ourselves. I mean, I look, and if I would let him, Turner would have a different activity. By the way, Turner is my 6-year-old. Turner would have a different activity every night of the week if we would let him. Mm-hmm. And so we have said, like, he wanted to play soccer really bad, and that broke my heart because I hate soccer. And so, but I was going to let him play up until the point that the games were on Sundays. And I was like, that just doesn't fly because Sundays are for family and church. And so that's been our one day that we can step back from other commitments and whatnot. So, but I think kids are so over scheduled. So they've got, extracurricular Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. They've got homework like crazy, all these other things. And so life is just insane now. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know about you guys, but I'm assuming that you three were raised in Christian homes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, somebody muted Tim.
He muted himself. It wasn't me.
Oh, look at that. And so, I wasn't. So I accepted Christ before my mom and stepdad. And so now once they got into it, it was an every week thing, where they would go. And I was never told I couldn't go, but we lived 20 minutes from the church that I attended when I was younger. And so a lot of times I would have to stay the night with my aunt and uncle to go. So I think a lot of times kids are a little more apt to be involved with church type stuff to where parents have taken a step back and they're like, we don't want anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. So I almost wonder if that has to do with the commitment and literacy and all that.
Yeah.
We're not seeing a whole heaping amount of Christian homes anymore. Yeah. Now that's not to say that they're not moral homes, but we're not
sorry.
No, I was going to say we're not a churchy family type people anymore.
Yeah. Well, and people are going to reflect the culture they grow up in. And I don't think it's just teens that have trouble with commitment. I think our culture has trouble with commitment because, like we're saying, it is such a busy world. A lot of times commitment means saying, okay, even if something better comes along, I'm going to stick to this. And really our culture doesn't enforce that a whole lot. It's, well, something better came along. It is okay to cancel this, even though this person was counting on me. Or it is okay, even though I said, I'd be at this, it's okay to not be there. And obviously there are things that come up, right, that sometimes you're just like, yeah, hey, life's busy. I get it that you weren't able to. But our culture, just in general, I don't think adults or kids, I think we're all kind of regressing in being able to commit to stuff.
I think you're right. I think one of the issues we've got nowadays is it's not the kids anymore. It was the families to begin with anyway. Like before, Andy, you said that your son would like to go to play soccer, but when you think about it, he only will do what you enable him to do. And that's part of my pretty much the thing is like if I had my way back when I was in middle school or whatever, Wednesday night was a TV show I wanted to watch. And I had to go to church. And so if I had my druthers, I would have stayed home. If my parents would have put up with any tantrums, I could have thrown one and stayed home. But parents nowadays they're looking to find peace, versus making a stand at a cost. And I think really part of it is that even the parents don't have that deep of a commitment nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I also think that society as a whole right now, especially within the Western world and really within the United States, we're in a post-Christian society.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not and we're almost past post-Christian. And like I was talking to somebody that was quoting, and I can't even remember who they were quoting, but like looking at Australia, they're almost a pre-Christian society right now. And so I would venture to guess that over the next 5 to 20 years, that's where we'll be.
We're almost there now.
Yeah.
When you look at what's going on with the pandemic and what that's showing about our society and what's coming out as a result of that, that's kind of telling us, where our priorities actually are now. Now, I think we've gotten caught up as a movement on labeling people. So we got the boomers, we got the Xers, we got the millennials and the Zs and all that stuff.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, though, we're almost to the point where we're looking to create labels and who's going to be the first one to use it. So, I think, for instance, look at the boomers. You got boomers have got the broadest generation. Why? Well, because nobody was studying it back then. It probably would have been different. And then you got the Xers, and then you got the millennials, which have been under the microscope and trying to find out what a Gen Z actually is. What, they're in high school now, pretty much, is they're saying the Gen Z is middle school, maybe high schoolers. So we're actually creating the population by trying to identify them before they're established. So I kind of think we fulfill a prophecy. We're creating a statement, and now everything's got to live up to it. So we're going to bend the information to make it fit the definition.
Yeah.
So,
going back to something you said earlier, Tim, that I know we kind of moved off it, but I think one of the problems that student ministry in particular faces right now is that, and it's a problem that we've had for a while, I would think, is that the church has begun to replace the parent's role as the primary spiritual influencer. Parents sometimes just assume that we're doing it and don't do it at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that with lots of kids I've worked with throughout my time in student ministry.
Yeah.
Like I can remember my parents took a pretty hands-on role in my spiritual development.
Right.
But talking to other people, some parents don't. And I think that is where we're hurting. It kind of leads back to that biblical illiteracy and stuff. I think a lot of it is just parents are sometimes dropping the ball when it comes to their child's faith.
I think, Ben, you probably had, you can look back when you were taught more than most, but with a father who's, and I'm assuming, with a father who's a pastor, you're kind of growing up in the test tube, so to speak. You're under the microscope. But most families aren't teaching their kids. The funny part about that, all the research is still saying that the main influence in a child's life is the family. But what are they teaching kids? So with a 50% divorce rate, at least a 50%, which is echoed in the church as well as the secular world, we're teaching some of the messages that we are protecting them from years ago. Convenience of relationships, like you were saying, Ben, before, convenience of commitment, like, okay, I'm going to go because I'm expected to go, but I really don't want to go, but I'm going to still go, versus, hey, what's in it for me? I don't feel like going tonight. I'm not going to go. Parents aren't going to push about it. They don't want the hassle. And they really don't necessarily believe in the commitment on their part either. But here's another thing that cracks me up. And we're probably right on the very threshold of catching the bad side of this, is most kids are transient, even with youth groups. So from church to church, visiting youth groups, there's no loyalty to the parents' church, and there's definitely no denominational loyalty. I'm going to go to this because it's a Methodist group. I don't really care. Half the congregation doesn't even know the difference between being a Baptist, Methodist, or Presbyterian, or whatever. So it's just like, where do I go? Because I enjoy the people. I enjoy the preacher. What has got the best youth group I want to hang out with today or this week? That kind of stuff. That's why, Andy and Josh, that's why I feel it's such a significant thing for us to be present in a school, because that's the one place they can't escape. That's the one place they can't negotiate absence. They have still, by law, got to be there. So for us, that's a better bed or seed bed to work off of than a church in some fashions, because the kids, I'm saying 5 to 10 years, these church hoppers will be church hopping as adults, you know? And if our software at our church, which is about 2,000 to 3,000 people, tells us that every 6 weeks is regular attendance, you know, that's pathetic, you know?
Yeah. So piggybacking off of that, kind of, like, I think the whole denominational, what did you like, allegiance or whatever you want to look
Loyalty.
at, loyalty. That's it. I think that's going to go out the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really cool video that I watched. There's a guy that I know out in Hollywood. He pastors a church called the Iglesia, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Church in Hollywood is how you can find it. But he made a video, him and his church, talking about how church could be run differently. And instead of having these, like, they showed it to like the restaurant. So you come because this church has an awesome youth ministry, or this church does kids ministry, right? Or, you know, they have the flashy pastor that everybody wants. And so, you know, people are shopping from a buffet.
Yeah.
Trying to get what they want. And so
we
did it like food trucks, to where we equip the people within our church. They come on Sundays and fill up with what they need. And then you establish, you know, food truck churches that go out into the community. And so, like, I think of that, we do that fairly well within the schools. You know, the different churches come together and we go within the school, and then you have some people that are really into sports, so they can go into sporting events or into pubs and this, that, and everything else, and start sharing the gospel that way, rather than trying to be attractional to get them in the buildings, which goes against everything youth ministry has been over the last few years. But
that was the mistake, where we're measuring the success by church attendance, not church influence. Okay. For instance, when Holcomb, Governor Holcomb, a couple of days ago made a remark about, you know, shutting down the state with the pandemic, he made a remark in there that my wife really caught. I saw it, I heard it, but I didn't catch as much as she did. Because he knew his statement was going to affect church attendance. He says, but the church, they are bodies, not buildings. Now, I'm going to assume Holcomb might be a Christian, he might be religious of something. He might not be, I don't know. But that was a key point. The church is a body, not the building. Well, how many of us try and measure our success rate by our attendance? And we don't even look at the quality of their walk, because that's judging, you know? I mean, that's the ridiculousness now, where there's no shame, there's no repentance, it's minimal, or if repentance, it's because I got caught, you know? There's no really brokenness that leads people to really the cross to begin with, which is really what you want. And as a result of that, you know, we're this consumeristic mindset. I mean, I used to fight against it, but I'm really starting to believe in that's where we're at, because Andy, you're right. You know, what the church is feeding, and now we're in competition. So you have these silo churches, you know, they're in competition with each other. We are blessed, I think, and Andy and Josh, you guys can attest to this. We are blessed in Terre Haute with a minister association, but a youth pastor association that we cross boundaries, and we do work side by side. And really, there's no tower per se. Now, we might hold up ourselves for comparisons, but in reality, I mean, look at this. There's, you know, Josh, you and Andy, and Ben, you guys are, you know, from different churches, some similar backgrounds, but you're working for the same kingdom. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget that. And I'll give you an example. Right now, I was asked by the school corporation to head up, and Andy, you're part of this, is Josh, you know, the superintendent goes to your church. But we've been asked, YFC has been asked to head up all the churches in the area to hand out food to kids who are missing their free and reduced lunches, that they'd be free if they're going to school. We have 19 churches. I was just in a meeting with Rob earlier today. We're 19 churches. We're moving about 1,300 people's worth of meals, 1,300 meals a day. The school corporation as a whole is doing total of 3,000. All right, so we're doing about 45% of the moving of meals just with churches alone, not nonprofits, not other schools, churches alone. And across the board, these 19 churches that we've recruited and we got doing it are various backgrounds, but it's because there's a willingness to work together. And Terre Haute is really, really blessed by that as a whole. But that didn't happen overnight either. So.
No, I feel like that took some time because, I mean, even when I've been in the community here since, 2011, I think, 2010, 2011. And I feel like it wasn't always that since I've been here. I feel like it's even gotten stronger since the short time that I've been in town.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talking about how, youth ministry has changed over the years, I think we kind of started with some ways that it's changed that's been difficult. This might be a cool transition, and this is kind of right. What Tim's just been talking about is a positive shift in youth ministry, possibly is maybe we are going a direction where churches will look more at, hey, working together rather than you talked about we label ourselves a millennial, a Gen Z, boomer. We label ourselves, I'm this type of Christian, I'm this type of Christian. Maybe we're moving towards just looking at, I'm a Christian, I love Jesus, I want other people to, I want to show people about him, let's work together. Maybe a shift in youth groups, hopefully seeing that too. Tim, do you have some ways you think youth ministry has changed for the good over the years that we could look at?
I think there's the major universal in the sense that the kids, we can point to changes in the sense like we just did, but I think kids are basically the same that they've always been. They're still hungry for relationships. They're still hungry for attention. I don't think it's such an informational issue for them. Like, I only believe in Christ if you tell me the right answer to this question about the Bible I've got. I think really that might be there, but more often than not, from what I've seen, is a kid will ask me a hard question, and I may not have the answer immediately, but when I come back with an answer, the kid's forgotten they asked it, but they're touched by the fact that you're coming back to them because you remember to reach back out to them. So learning the kids' names, hanging out with them, spending time with them, being concerned about their welfare. Now this is the one thing I'm a little bit nervous about. We pour so much care about a kid into a kid, which is important, but we have got to get the kid to the point where we're also saying it's not about you. Right now, the way that we're teaching the gospel and also a strong level of affirmation, like everybody in the soccer team gets a trophy no matter what. It's almost like they don't need Christ because they haven't learned their need for Christ yet, because I'm doing great. I'm a great person. There's a lot of meism going on. Somehow they have got to be moved, or somehow we got to find a way not beating them up over the head with a Bible, but they got to understand they do have a need for Christ, and it's not about them, and they'll never get it on their own. That's the hard part.
Well, I think with that though, like I look at our work in the school and what we're doing, or what Christ is doing through us, with the breakfast clubs and then the after school club that we've started. I almost think that we're kind of moving in that direction because there's not a whole lot, like Josh and I in particular, like we're pretty quick to call them out on being stupid. Mm-hmm. Right? When they say something they shouldn't say or act a certain way, I mean, we're pretty quick at calling them out. And so we're not totally affirming everything they're doing. Mm-hmm. But I think that as we're there and they see that we're taking an interest in them, and that shows mm-hmm. the love of Christ a lot more than what it was used to. And I know it's different here because we have the access, right, that most places would dream about having. So, but I think we're definitely in the right track. Yeah.
I think, Ben, I'm not sure if this will go over fast or good, but the idea of collaboration amongst churches is going to be necessary. But there's still going to be an issue about distinction with theology and doctrine. And I want to be careful that you throw doctrine and theology out the door for collaboration. I do not agree with that. I believe in given truths and given doctrines, and I may not agree with everybody 100%, or they may not agree with me, but there are certain things in my mind that are non-negotiable. And I think we have to determine what those things are. You just spend time, but again, this is an issue about the adults, the parents, the pastors, and whoever having a deep enough knowledge or a willingness to learn about what they believe. I mean, right now, And maybe I'd get in trouble for saying this on your podcast, but I believe on a young earth concept, but I don't believe it just because of certain things. I believe.
To mute him. There we go. All right. Here we go. Moving on.
But you know what I'm saying? I'm saying those are the key issues. We gotta figure out how to negotiate our way through it, so we can work side by side without feeling that we're compromising whatever the specifics we believe in that are non-negotiables. So, and you got to be careful with that.
But with that, so I don't want to spark an argument or a debate or I'm right and you're wrong, but I could be.
Well, we know you're wrong. It's cool. Get it out.
But I'm just wondering, like, are we taking a stand on that and just digging? Let's look at young Earth, right? Are we taking a stand and putting our feet in that and the way that we're presenting it and, throwing everybody else to the side?
Right.
Is that not hurting our cause more than it's helping?
Well, that's why I say
you can believe that, and that's fine. And I probably lean that way. But if you want to talk New Earth or whatever, the other one is
Old Earth.
Whatever. So don't
the
jump.
opposite, new and old. Oh, okay.
If you want to talk New Earth or New Earth, I'll talk to you about it. But,
Right. So, but shut up. But I mean, is that not hurting our cause if we dig because I mean, if they believe that Jesus is who he says he is,
right,
and he died for them,
right,
then we have that. That's really the biggest non-negotiable. Christ is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for me, I've always seen it as my hill.
Mm-hmm.
My hills are salvational.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a salvation topic, then I'm willing to fight about it if it needs to be fought about. But if it's not salvational, then it's just details for me.
Well, here's the part, and I agree with you, but here's the part too where we have each got to figure out not just where that salvation line is.
Sure.
How does some of our theology or doctrine, when you carry it to the logical nth degree, does it affect the salvific issues? Because, for instance, let's say we have a discussion about New Earth, Old Earth. As you start to dig into Scripture, as you start to dig into the language, as you start to dig in history, there are some things, and it stops becoming an issue about that and becomes an issue about, okay, now, do I believe him? Do I believe this guy? Do I believe a statement in the New Testament by an apostle, by Jesus himself when he quotes? It gets to the point where really our teaching is interlocked. It's not categories in our teaching as much as there's a lot of dovetailing. And that's the part where even if you have disagreements, okay, and Josh and Andy, we both have a friend who loves to use the word heretic as we're talking about churches in town. Even if you're in the midst of something like that, can we at least compassionately talk to each other without burning the bridge? And that's pretty much a key. Like, for instance, one of the churches that's very instrumental right now in doing outreach with food, and will be helping us later on with my wife doing supplying after school care, or not after school care, but daycare for essential workers during this shutdown. One of them is a church that our friend doesn't really care for because of one of their theological points. Okay? But they're extremely helpful in reaching out to the kids and supplying daycare during an emergency situation that we're in. So I understand the debates. And Josh, I understand you when you say that, it has to be salvific. But the point is for us all is like, there are points where some of our doctrinal teaching crosses into the barrier of salvific because it's just a question, how do I interpret Scripture? How do I believe what he says? And if I don't believe what he says here, or I question how it's interpreted my hermeneutics.
Yeah. I mean, my point isn't as much the not talk about non-salvation issues. My point was more, as long as we agree on salvation issues, I'll work with you.
Yeah.
I can disagree with you on a theological point that I think is important, but I'll work with you if you're still preaching the crucified, resurrected Savior.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me throw out to you guys, and this is the turn the punch bowl, about The last time that Butler, I think, played in the Final Four or the Final Two.
2011 or 12, yeah.
2011 or 12. Brad Stevens, the coach, was going to be doing a lunch for us for YFC, a fundraising lunch. He's going to come to Terre Haute and do this lunch. And we had finally negotiated. It took 6 to 7 months to work it out. But as they were going through the playoffs, our stock, if you can say it, our stock, because I was in the newspaper saying, hey, on such and such a date, this is what's going to happen with Brad Stevens coming and it costs us $25. That was just a news article. It wasn't an ad. It wasn't me promoting the event. That was just like they got word and they said, hey, can we report on this? I said, sure, fine. That weekend beforehand, the pastors of this association in Terre Haute that we had, okay, decided, and I got to understand how significant this was. They decided we're going to do a retreat. You know, they've been building for this for a while. You get pastors to stay one night in the same location together, away from their office, away from their family. They're going away 45 minutes from Terre Haute, all right? And they're going to go spend the night together and have a meeting. And it may have been one night, it may have even been 2 nights. I'm trying to remember. But during that time, something happened with the meeting that with the pastors later on created a rift because one remark from one pastor made a remark about what he'd like to do in the future and who he'd like to work with.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember this, Josh? Or
yeah, you told me.
Okay. And what happened after that was, okay, who do we serve alongside? What is the breaking point for us to say, I will work with this church except for this church, you know? And what is it on the litmus paper that says, okay, there are some people we will work alongside and work with on projects or whatever, but there are some churches we won't because we don't want to be identified or aligned with them in a public perspective. Because if the world looks at us and goes like, well, such and such church works with this church, and this church believes this, but that church believes that, then in the eyes of the world, we're kind of like going, well, we don't really want to be aligned with that because that might be heresy or they might be heretic or, you know. And so that's the hard part is determining when not work together. When do we not work together? And what are those issues? So when you say salvific, you know, it has to be salvation oriented. Yeah. But then again, now too, the term salvation has evolved, you know.
Sure.
There's no repentance anymore.
For me personally, I'd lean towards love with things, you know, like I want to work with the most people and, you know, I might try to steer people towards churches that I agree with more, you know, like I'm not going into things like saying you got to come to my church. Like I don't do that with like YFC, you know, like I come to YFC and I'm like, hey, go to any of these churches. They're all great churches.
But now you still got to define love because some people, when you correct them, that's not love, it's hate.
No, I know. I'm saying for me, like I'm leaning towards
I
love.
think too, also
willing to help and work with people, you know.
Something you said a while ago is we have to be able to be compassionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the church overall, like Big C Church, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we forgot about compassion. And so we have been beating people over the head with what we are like our little hills.
Mm-hmm.
And we forgot that Jesus said to love people first. You know, Genesis 1 came before Genesis 3. So you have to love people and then go out. But we forgot that whole love and compassion thing.
I know, and I agree 100%. But Genesis 2 also kicked him out of the garden. I mean, you know,
yeah.
So it's that's the hard part is because the definitions have shifted on us. So when you say the church has got to learn to love, yeah, we do, because you know what, we dropped the ball. We really did, because we created towers. And if you don't do exactly like me, I can't work with you, and that's wrong. But then you got to be careful of erring to the other side of that pendulum swing now too.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced. Like I've seen this a couple times. People on Facebook like to pose the question of, you know, if Paul was here today and he was writing a letter to the church, well, you know, like what kind of things would he call us out on? And you know, for me, one of the first things I think of is I think he'd call us out on how divided we are. You know, just how divided we've allowed ourselves to become.
Yeah.
It's denominational walls. It's not even denominational walls. Like, you know, there's 4 other churches of Christ in Terre Haute. You know, I'm at East Side. There's South Side. There's North Side. There's only 3 now, but there's 3 of us, and maybe it's geographical, but it's still like we could be one church because we agree on everything.
You guys do stuff together though, Josh, with some of the other churches?
Yeah, we do stuff with North Side and South Side. We have a unity thing that we do.
Okay.
But it's like, how many Christian churches are in town? How many Southern Baptist churches are in town?
Well,
I get the geographical, like multiple churches, but still, I mean, we're just so divided. It's just, I think Paul, I think God would be disappointed with us about how much we allow ourselves to be divided. You are right. There are things that are worth having discussions over, and there's things that are worth those things because some people are just wrong on some things, right? But I still think we have to be better if we're going to succeed in the future of getting around those walls.
Yeah.
So
I want to be careful romanticizing the past and demonizing the past too much too, because
sure.
A while back I read the book by Metaxas on Martin Luther, and oh my gosh, that guy was he would go monkey on somebody. If he disagreed with him, he would go after him, and he went after him with vehemence to the point where we'd go like, man, is this guy even a Christian for the anger he's showing, and that kind of stuff. So I don't know the answer. I just know the parts I don't like, and I guess I've been around too long in some ways too, because I'm like, I don't want to go back the way it was. I see the direction it's going now, but I'm afraid of going too far in that direction. Can we find this nice middle ground where why can't we all agree? But I know we can't. So that's the hard part. And that's why I bring up the term compassion. I think it has to be wise compassion, not compassion for the sake of compassion. I mean, you got kids. That compassion, you'll spank them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's been lost, guys, I don't know what your churches are like, but I'm an elder at a church right now. One of the things that is lost right now is church discipline. How does a church deal with a problem inside its own walls? Well, how does a church fire or release a pastor well? That tells you a lot of stuff right there too.
Yeah.
Everything, I think everything in life, you want to be successful, you want to keep pushing forward. It just all comes back to balance, really the last several topics we've talked about, balance has kind of been coming in my mind, going back to the teens, how we want to show them that it's not about them, that it's about following Jesus, but also want to show them that they are still special. It's about finding that balance, letting them know you are a masterpiece made by God, but so is everyone else. That doesn't put you above anyone else being a masterpiece.
You're no Mona Lisa.
Yeah. Looking up at church divisions once again about balance, having real discussions with people, hearing people, finding out what do we believe on things. Is this something that's just my opinion, or is this something that's really something that needs to be pursued because God or Jesus said so? And then even with church discipline, finding balance comes back to love and realizing that love has to be a balanced thing, and that showing forgiveness is part of love, but tough love is part of love too, and that's something I've always struggled with. Tough love, if I love someone, I don't want to tell them off. I don't want to tell them they're doing something wrong. It's tough, but part of church, part of the whole scope of love is finding.
Talk to my 6-year-old. I'm really good at that.
And, yeah.
If you talk to my 6-year-old, I'm really good at that tough love thing.
See, yeah, there you go.
That's a paddling.
That's a balanced parent.
Ben, you and Josh, I don't know if you know who watches the podcast and stuff, or if this is fresh or something new, but I'd be kind of curious to see how many? 2 people?
It's
super new. Our first video had like 120 people. Last one's like 40.
Good. But my question for them is to find out what does their youth ministries in their town look like? What's that? Because I know it's based on sizes of towns and all that. But I'd be kind of curious what other youth pastors are saying to each other in other communities, and how much effort they're working to try and reach across, or if their pastors even let them do that. I remember back in the day when I first got here, I was one of 2 guys in the whole town paid staff for youth, for the youth, not from YFC, but for youth for my church at that time.
Was the other one Moses?
Yes, it was.
I was waiting for it. I was waiting. Which is a good time to put a shameless plug. Like and subscribe to our videos here, and then answer those questions in the comments.
Well, you should. I mean, I think everybody should find out what's going on out there. Like what you're doing with this is to find out, to play with some hot topics. But I'd be curious to find out what's going on out in those communities, big or small, as far as youth pastors trying to reach out to each other. Because I'll be honest with you, youth pastors reach out to each other faster than senior pastors, in my opinion. I don't know if it's nature of the beast or what, but like I said, the one thing you got that's a common denominator is kids, and those kids all see each other at school, not church, and school becomes a common denominator for them. So it's not like, well, my church has got the biggest youth group. I'll tell you what, those kids in your youth group are hanging out with other kids at school.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Is that a good point to end the recording here?
That would probably be a good time to wrap her up. Guys, you got any final thoughts?
We covered a lot of topics. If you're watching, hop in on any one of them. Give your insights, give your opinions, ask some further questions. Give us some feedback on what you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Something you think we could go further in, something maybe that you think would be more relevant, et cetera, et cetera. Just all feedback is good feedback, especially, this is episode 3. We're early into it. We're figuring everything out episode by episode. So we love any feedback and any criticism as it comes. So we appreciate anyone who watched.
Hey, also, real quick, Josh, when are you coming home?
I'm really enjoying Hawaii right now.
Stay there, man. It's quarantine.
But
stay there.
I can't leave.
What, at least 14 days, right?
Yeah, I can't leave. But aloha from the beach and mahalo to my homies. I don't actually know what mahalo means, so I hope that's not like some bad thing.
I really hope it's a bad word. That would.
Mahalo.
Yeah, Ben, look it up. What's
Ben,
mahalo?
are you looking that up for us?
Oh, yeah.
And this would be the one time that I would say it's okay to lie.
No.
The greeting.
Okay. A Hawaiian word when you want to curse the very ground that someone is standing. I'm just kidding. A Hawaiian word used when thanking someone.
Mahalo, homies.
Oh, man, Tim about died right there.
Josh is saying thanks for watching and thanks for being on with us, Tim. Mahalo.
Yeah, like and subscribe. And if you have questions for Tim, you can ask him, and we'll ask Tim and get back to you.
Yeah.
So,
thanks for having me, guys.
So
Hey, thanks, buddy.